My name is Bradley Neve. I'm the chairman and the founder of Ivy Classical Academy. We're gonna jump right into the presentation because I know there's going to be a lot of questions at the end of this. But I want to introduce David Withun, who is our head of school. He has just moved here with his wife Vanessa and their 3 children. He is an Army veteran, but this is also his third classical academy. So he's had stints in Georgia and Florida. And this is something of a homecoming for him because he earned his master's and his PhD from Faulkner in humanities. So he is not unfamiliar with Prattville and Montgomery. So, but before we invite David on stage, we do have about a 10-minute presentation, a 10-minute video to play. So everybody just hang tight, and we'll put the video on, and then David will come up from there. So thank you again for coming out.
You can walk into a school and you can know in a matter of minutes whether or not the culture is right and the school is mission aligned. Everything else flows out of that.
Good morning, Daisy Mae. How are we this morning? Good.
Our mission is to train the minds and to improve the hearts of our students through a classical, content-rich curriculum that emphasizes virtuous living, traditional learning, and civic responsibility.
Good morning, first grade.
Good morning, Dr. Whitman.
Hillsdale charter schools are classical charter schools. And what that means is they bring a well-rounded liberal arts curriculum, great teaching, and a sense of mission and purpose to average American kids.
We start every day with every scholar, every faculty member reciting our mission all together as a reminder that this is what we came to do. We came to train minds and to improve hearts.
Good morning, Jacksonville Classical Academy Argonauts. All together, the pillars of virtue.
Courage, honesty,
Perseverance, self-government, service, courtesy, and responsibility. Have a wonderful final day before spring break, Argonauts.
Using the word classical encourages us to remember that we're doing basic things here. We're doing things that are common to all human beings. That's a superb place to start. And so classical philosophy is interested in what things are and the good appropriate to them.
The one thing that a classical education emphasizes that other educations do not is the learning for the sake of learning.
In order to appropriately educate a child, you must speak to more than just the academic part of a child.
It's not just about knowing things. Education should be so much more than that. It should be about the formation of character.
And that idea was embedded in early K-12 education. Character formation, forming a whole human being, this is what education was understood to be back then. As you walk around the hallways, there ought to be respect for teachers. There ought to be kindness towards students. There ought to be happiness and a sense of wonder. There ought to be activity and engagement and discourse and the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of truth.
The reason why I think classical education is the best is because it draws on a long tradition within Western civilization.
We give students a really robust, exciting, rich education. We don't restrict ourselves to the minimum standards of the state.
We want to trace the greatest ideas that have ever been a part of the human experience.
And so we read the great works and we study the thoughts that have been propagated across Western civilization in order to unpack those questions.
What we do in government class is we read the Constitution. We read Madison's notes on the Constitution. We read the Federalist Papers, which gives the rationale behind the provisions in the Constitution. And we read the Declaration of Independence, which gives us the political theory that informed the Constitution.
These are 12-year-olds that have now read the 2 most important founding documents of our country in full, and they have their fully annotated copies of them.
We are giving them a buffet of the most amazing books of antiquity, looking at things that have stood the test of time.
When I'm going through those tough texts, or when I'm struggling to read those novels, it is very encouraging to know that I have someone who's going alongside me with them.
Rather than clearing a path free of those obstacles, we want to be there to support them and to show them how much there is to be gained by overcoming those obstacles.
But acknowledging that the perseverance and the courage that it takes to sit in that moment when you're struggling is so beautiful and does more for the character of their heart than anything else they're going to learn in that moment.
When you wake up in the morning as a grown-up and you look out on the world and are worried or anxious or concerned, it's not your college and career readiness that's going to make it through the day. It's your ability to be optimistic, to have faith that things are going to go well, to have courage to make the tough decisions that you know are right.
They want to teach your children how to think. They want to teach your children the importance of who they are in the world.
And that's very important that we do that so that we can help continue to grow and develop them to become passionate people who are making a difference in serving the country and the communities that they live in.
So how do you become what you become? Practice. Aristotle says you form your character by making choices, and especially the hard choices are formative.
In the end, what we like to say is these well-rounded human beings that have been truly exposed to a rich and deep liberal arts and science education, they will be prepared to do anything.
Here at Hillsdale College, we're a teaching organization, and the K-12 office is no exception. We teach people how to establish and maintain excellent classical schools, focusing on 5 areas: board governance, school leadership, curriculum, classical teaching, and school culture.
The college now works with local schools and provides them the background information, recommendation, even helps connect them with the people who they need in order to run these schools.
What they offer is a philosophy, resources, a curriculum scope and sequence to help guide teachers in the carrying out of each school's mission.
The primary work with Hillsdale College is teachers and how they can improve their practice in the classroom, and then the curriculum. Right? The curriculum is the soul of the school.
When a school like ours opens, Hillsdale sends a team of curricular experts, teacher coaches, professors, and those folks spend about 2 weeks with the faculty getting it ready to teach.
They are absolutely passionate about helping teachers in their classrooms. What they actually do is just offer really good advice.
So not only do I feel challenged as a teacher to be my very best for these kids, but I also feel like I have the best behind me.
I can get on a Zoom call and speak with the people who are helping with the literature, the literacy in Hillsdale, and I can be connected to different schools in the United States, and we're all talking about what's going on in our schools.
So it's really an amazing all-around package of in-kind support that we don't pay anything for.
Our job is to help the schools be great, and we ask them for nothing and everything in return. Our advice is free. But it's also really expensive because all we ask in return is that you do an excellent job.
The K-12 initiative fills a huge gap in our nation's education system because what we need are thoughtful, informed people who are not just educated to be moneymakers, but who are educated to become fathers and mothers and leaders.
In an obvious way, education is the future, but it's also the present. What we say to the young and how we treat them, that's as important a thing as we do in life.
The most rewarding part of my job is seeing lives changed.
Most of the families have come here for a reason. They want something better. They want something more complete for their children.
We're providing an oasis for many of our scholars. It's a place where they are guaranteed to be safe, they're guaranteed to be loved, and teachers who care.
That, to me, is invaluable. I mean, there's nothing more important as a parent than to know that you've given them that.
One of the main reasons that I love it here is the relationship between teachers and students.
Students, what does service mean?
Here at Treasure Valley Classical Academy, I read to the littles. I read stories to them every single day. I get to meet them. I get to interact with them. I get to check uniforms. I get to have conversations with them. I get to see the ones that are sad, and I get to follow up with them and sit down next to them and try to figure out what is bothering them or what has gone wrong in their lives.
Their curiosity, their pursuit of knowledge, the ability to help them to ask questions that they wouldn't have asked before. Those are things that they might not remember, but what I won't forget is that.
To be pulled towards helping more kids is why I ended up coming here.
This school and the education that's offered in this city will change lives.
The work is so important.
That's why I'm here. I don't know that I could do anything other than this. This is what I love and where I belong.
Our ambition is to sow the future seeds of liberty with the formation of human beings into citizens that will nourish this experiment with liberty that we've been bequeathed.
If we can improve the schools, we will improve the future of the country, and we will improve ourselves.
Then we can turn the tide.
My greatest hope for our students is that they will one day look back and say that they have lived a life worth living. And by that point, have had a direct role in perpetuating the American experiment with liberty.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming this evening to hear more about Ivy Classical Academy. As Bradley already introduced me, I'm Dr. David Withun. I'm the founding head of school for Ivy Classical Academy. I have been working with Hillsdale College as long as they have been working with K-12 schools. So they started working with K through 12 schools back in 2012, and that was when I started working with them. And in that time, I've helped to found 2 previous schools, but I'm very excited to be here in Prattville, and as Bradley mentioned, it is something of a homecoming for me to come back to the Montgomery area, so I'm very excited to be here and to be founding Ivy Classical Academy. Slide, please. So, as you probably got from the video, the Hillsdale network of schools is a very large network. So while we are a new school in the sense of we are opening our doors, K through 5, in fall or August of 2024, we're really an old school because we're drawing on a wealth of resources in terms of Hillsdale, and of course a very long educational tradition that goes back, hundreds if not thousands of years when you're talking about classical education itself. And what unites all of those different schools, so the ones that you saw in the video were Treasure Valley Classical Academy, which is out in Fruitland, Idaho. I just flew out there last month, and it is 2 hours from anything. There is Golden View Classical Academy, which is in Colorado, my former school, which was Jacksonville Classical Academy. So very different settings, very different parts of the country, the West Coast, the East Coast, and everything in between. But what unites all of them is that we have a common mission. And the mission is phrased differently at different schools, but it usually goes something like what you see on the screen there behind me. Our mission is to train our students' minds and hearts through a classical, content-rich curriculum that puts an emphasis on virtuous living, traditional learning, and civic responsibility. And at almost all of these schools, one of the things that we start the day with every day is every faculty member and every staff member and every student reciting that mission from memory together, because it's a reminder of what we came to do, right? And I'm going to get more into kind of the substance of it here in just a minute, but I want you to notice what is not included in that mission statement, right? There's nothing about all the different ways that we can artificially inflate graduation rates. There is nothing about what % of our students are going to go to X college or get X credentials, right? It is about training minds and hearts. It is about providing young people with the character formation that will help them to be successful anywhere that they go, right? Dr. Robert Garrow, in the video that you just watched, he was the principal at Golden View Classical Academy. He has a great sentence in there where he says, it's not your college and career readiness that's going to get you through life or through the rest of the day, right? A lot of schools, most public schools and probably most private schools, and most charter schools for that matter in this country, will tell you a lot about what they can help your child do from 9 to 5. That's 1/8 of their day, right? Classical education will prepare them for what's going to happen from 9 to 5. They're going to be well prepared for college, right? Our college entrance for 4-year colleges in Hillsdale schools is about 90%. So about 90% of our graduates go on to 4-year colleges or universities. Average SAT and ACT scores are higher than the national average at all of our schools, right? But we do that by not focusing on those things. Instead, we focus on preparing thoughtful, articulate, young people who have character and who love good things, beautiful things, and true things. Slide, please. Our honor code is also one of the things that we'll recite every day at the beginning of the day at Ivy Classical Academy. An Ivy Classical Academy student is honest in word and deed, dutiful in study and service, and respectful and kind to others, right? I think that that's a wonderful encapsulation of exactly what we want our children to become, the kind of people that we want them to become, and that is the focus of a classical curriculum. Slide, please. Our school pledge. Right after the Pledge of Allegiance and our morning recitations, we'll say the school pledge. I will learn the true, I will do the good, I will love the beautiful. And that's referring to an idea that's more than 2,000 years old and that comes to us from the Greek philosopher Plato, that there are things that are simply true, good, and beautiful for everybody, right? In a lot of contemporary education, you'll hear things like, you'll hear a lot of talk of values sometimes, right? But value is a word that I tend to try to avoid because what values are, or what one person's values are may not be the same as another person's values, right? Think about the value of $1. The value of $1 has changed a lot in the last 3 years, right? Much less in the last 300 years. Whereas virtue, what's true, what's good, and what's beautiful, hasn't changed. Those things remain the same. You hear a lot of talk in contemporary education about wanting to prepare students for how to think and not what to think. And that's good and true to some extent, right? I don't want to tell children what beliefs to have about everything that there is or anything like that, but you do want them to have some sense of what to think, what to recognize as something that is good, what to recognize as something that is true or something that is false, how to recognize that something is true or false, how to recognize that something is beautiful, right? That's not something that most schools will talk about, is wanting to help young people appreciate a sunset or a great work of poetry or a beautiful work of art from the Renaissance. We don't just learn about those things because they're interesting historically or they are objects for our literary analysis so that we can read the poem and then answer a bunch of A, B, C, D multiple choice questions about it and go on to the next one on the test. We read those things and we look at those things because they're beautiful and because seeing beautiful things does something to us as human beings. Because human beings naturally want to know what is true, want to see things that are beautiful, and want to do things that are good. Slide, please. So the fundamental question in education is, what is the purpose of it, right? And it starts with, what is a human being? What is the purpose of a human life? Is it to pass standardized tests? I hope not. Is it to get the highest ACT score? It's a good thing to get a high ACT score. I'm not saying that it's not a good thing, but it's not the thing that a human life is about, right? Classical education gets down to the more fundamental aspects of what human life is, and that is to live a fulfilled life, to do good things, to be a good person, to be thoughtful, Moral character and civic virtue are at the center of what makes a classical education a classical education. What we aim for is the formation of young people's souls and minds. And this is why we read the things that we read. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. I know I'm kind of talking at the high level right here, but I'm going to come down to the kindergarten level, I promise, okay? But this is what we're aiming for, right? When we are talking about the purpose of an education, we need to start with the top, not with the bottom. So we start with, what do we want our graduates to look like 13 years from now? When they start kindergarten with us and then go through all 13 years of their education, their K through 12 education with Ivy Classical Academy, what do we want them to look like at the other end? And do I want them to have great SAT scores? Sure. Do I want them to go to great colleges? Absolutely. Do I want them to have fulfilling careers and make lots of money? Definitely. But more importantly, I want them to be good people. I want them to be kind people. I want them to be thoughtful people. I want them to be people that are able to recognize good, true, and beautiful things when they encounter them. We do this by evoking a sense of joy and wonder, something that is, I think, lost in too much contemporary education. I have encountered in my time in education far too many students who are coming to me, coming to a classical education at 7th or 8th grade level, and so not having had one up until that point. And the only time that they've read a story or a poem or whatever it is when they then had to go and answer a bunch of multiple choice questions about it. And that's what they're doing over and over and over again. What do we think? What is a child going to think that poetry is for, if the only time that they read poetry is so that they can then go on and answer a bunch of innocuous, silly questions about the poem that they just read? Is this a haiku or a sonnet? Who cares? To some extent, you've got to know that, but ultimately the question is it beautiful, right? How does it make you feel? How does it touch you? How does it influence your thoughts and ideas, your experience and perception of the world? That is how you teach poetry, right? Science, the same thing. It's not a mere collection of empty facts. It's not simply, I'm blanking on the 9 planets. There's all the different acronyms for it, right? All the different little sayings. And that's important. We have to know all 9 of the planets, right? But I think more fundamental is a sense of wonder and awe at looking at the night sky. That was why people began to study astronomy in the first place. What led to us being able, as we are now, human beings, being us, not me personally, I haven't done it, but what led to human beings being able to put a man on the moon was somebody gazing up at that moon 20, 30,000 years ago and finding it awe-inspiring and beautiful. And that's what we want our students to start with as well. And of course, we want to inspire a love of learning for its own sake. Not because it gets us something else, not because it gets us a high test score, not because it gets us an A, but because it is good to know things. Learning feels good, it's joyful, it's an experience that we want to engage in, and children are naturally like this. Those of you that have young children, count how many times they say why in a day. Right? Count how many questions they ask in general in a day, and it's going to be a lot. Why? Because children naturally want to learn. Well, why do they lose that? Could it be because we equate learning with drudgery by subjecting them to the things that we do in education because we've lost sight of what an education ultimately is about? Slide, please. So how do we take that theory of classical education and bring it down to a classroom? Well, among the practices that make that possible in the classroom is a deep knowledge and analysis of literary works and original source documents. I'm not sure why there's a question mark at the end of that, but I don't know, it is worth discussion. So we start with that in kindergarten, right? With learning the ABCs, learning phonics specifically, right? And then we build up to reading things like Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, a 2,400-year-old work about what it means to live a good life by the time that students are in 10th grade. right? The phonics is the building block that gets us there, and it's the reason why we learn to read. Why learn to read at all if we're not going to use that skill to read things that are going to make our lives better? And we do that by engaging with these great works of literature that have inspired generations of young people for hundreds, in some cases, like Aristotle, thousands of years. The Iliad and the Odyssey in 9th grade. These stories about ancient Greek and Trojan heroes fighting a war 3,000 years ago. Moby Dick in 11th grade, right? Kafka's Metamorphosis in 12th grade. All of these things that inspire the imagination and that teach our students about the human experience and about what it means to live a good life. We teach the discipline of logic explicitly, and that means both through mathematics, which is our primary source of learning logic, as well as in a logic course itself. Typically around 9th grade, we'll spend time teaching students explicitly how to think well. And we use Socratic discussion throughout. And this starts in the very early grades as well, with very simple discussions after reading a fairy tale or reading a story of Winnie the Pooh or Beatrix Potter or some other work like that. And then progresses to the point where by the time that students are in 11th or 12th grade, in their philosophy class, in their history class, in their literature class, they're primarily reading great works in those different traditions, so reading things like the Constitution itself, rather than having a teacher teach them out of a textbook. Your textbook is the Constitution in our government class. It is the Federalist Papers. It is the Declaration of Independence. And then we circle up our chairs and we discuss the big ideas in there, right? So when Thomas Jefferson says in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, what exactly does he mean by that? What does he mean when he says that there are certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? What is this pursuit of happiness thing, and how do we put that into practice, right? And so we discuss these big ideas and apply them in our own lives through Socratic discussion. And of course, we use materials and pedagogy that have stood the test of time. Those great works that I was just talking about and teaching methods that haven't changed. There have been all sorts of attempts to improve, for example, the way that we teach children how to read. You might have heard of balanced literacy, or you might have seen sight words and this sort of thing. None of those panned out. Turns out that the way that we've been teaching it for thousands of years is actually basically the only way to teach it, and that is through phonics. The result of all of these experiments over the last 60 years to find some other way of teaching children how to read is, according to the Department of Education, which are the ones that sponsored this giant experiment, that about 54% of people between ages 16 and 70 read at a 6th grade or below level. And now they're going back to phonics, and you can see the effect already in states like Mississippi that introduced a phonics curriculum just a couple of years ago and already has seen significant gains in their children's reading scores. Slide, please. Our curriculum at the K through 5 level especially consists of a few component elements. Literacy Essentials is our phonics program. So if you go back in the history of phonics instruction in the United States, Orton Gillingham was sort of the golden standard. And this is a descendant of Orton Gillingham that is takes into account more recent research into how children read. So there has been over the last couple of decades really an abundance of research into what it is that leads to the ability to read, to put together all of the different sounds and make sense of letters and that sort of thing, and the effect that it has on the human brain. And Literacy Essentials is an explicit phonics program that applies all of that knowledge and brings it down to the level where a kinder or first grade teacher can implement it, practically speaking, in their classroom. Generally speaking, our schools score very, very high in reading instruction from a very early point as a result of this program. I'll skip to the next one there. For our math program, we use Singapore math. This was the math program that was used in the country of Singapore, or developed in the country of Singapore, and then used as their national curriculum for a number of years while they were the world's leader in math education. When they switched to another program, they actually sank in the international rankings just a few years later, right? So this is also a a proven program with a great deal of research behind it, and it is one that does something very similar to what phonics instruction does to reading. Singapore Math does for math, where it breaks it down to its smallest constituent elements and then sort of builds up from there. And the trajectory is that all of our students will be on course to do Algebra 1, typically by 8th grade, sometimes by 9th grade, and then on to geometry, Algebra 2, and eventually calculus and trigonometry as well. The core knowledge curriculum, and you can see this broken down just a little bit more on that curriculum map that was near the door outside, is a curriculum that came out of research that was conducted in the 1970s and early 1980s by a man named E.D. Hirsch and his team of researchers. And essentially what Hirsch found and what his research found is that there is more to reading than just the phonics end of things, than just knowing the word. There's also the need for content knowledge, right? So one of the studies that Hirsch conducted found that children who already knew a lot about baseball but maybe didn't score very well on generalized reading tests tended to do better when given a passage about baseball and then asked to give, to provide a bunch of answers to questions about the passage they had just read, right? Whereas students who didn't know anything about baseball but had high reading test scores, when given that same passage, performed relatively poorly. And that was kind of an interesting discovery that opened up, well, a great deal more research that's been conducted over the last 30 years that points to the need to know things in order to learn more things. Right? The idea is the more you already know about a subject, the better you are able to make sense of a passage that you're reading about that subject. And so the core knowledge curriculum was designed by Hirsch initially, and then we've taken it and modified it a little bit and made it, I think, a bit fuller. And what it does is exposes students to a world of knowledge in the content areas, things like history, literature, science, the fine arts, art and music. They are given all of the kind of vocabulary of those subject areas, right? So in history, for example, our students in the first half of the year will, in kindergarten through 5th grade, walk through world history. So they'll start with ancient civilizations, Egypt and Mesopotamia and so on in the earliest grades. They'll go on to Greece and Rome in the 3rd grade, onto the Middle Ages in the 4th grade, the Renaissance in 5th grade. And what they're doing is building up all of that background knowledge about the way that the world works and about the history of the world. They're learning the kind of outline of the story of the world, right? And then in the second semester, they're doing the same thing with American history, but they'll actually loop through it 3 times in that same period of time. And that's giving them all of that content knowledge that they need, not just to understand the world around them, which of course is a main feature of learning all of this as well, but also to build the background knowledge that will make them strong readers, which is an important part of what we need for them to be able to do when they get to high school and are reading these great works of literature that I've already described. And of course, that is primarily in our high school curriculum, the great books that they encounter. These are those books, those ideas that have stood the test of time. The best that has been thought and said is a quote from Matthew Arnold, a poet of about 100 years ago, describing the works that our students will be reading. You may have heard teachers or principals or educators that you've encountered in the past say something like, it doesn't matter what they're reading as long as they're reading. That is not true. And it's not true for 2 reasons that I want to share with you. It's not true for many reasons, but 2 in particular. One, it's not true because not everything builds content knowledge. So not everything builds your store of knowledge that will make you a better reader, right? So Dork Diaries is not building the content knowledge that will support being a better reader later on. So it's not having the effect that a lot of teachers, I think, would like to hope that it would have. Just because they're reading, they're not developing their reading skills because they're not being exposed to that knowledge. Second reason, and I think probably the more important reason, is what children read shapes their perception of the world. It shapes the kind of person they become. And so we being Hillsdale College and all of those involved in the K-12 initiative, have very carefully selected the works of literature and the historical works and the philosophical works that we expose our children to, that we expose our students to, because we know that everything that they see and everything that they hear and everything that they read is shaping the kind of person that they grow up to be. And we want them to grow up to be the kind of people that I was just describing to you a moment ago. Slide, please. Hope you can see that well. This is just an overview of our curriculum here. You can take a closer look at it. It's on the foam board outside. But I think this should give you some idea of the progression in each of the different subject areas that our students go through. Again, with the focus in the lower school, or grammar school as it's called in this slide, learning the grammar of things, the vocabulary of world history and geography, the vocabulary of American history, right? Being exposed to the important names, learning by heart some of the more important passages. Our second graders, for example, will memorize the preamble to the Constitution, a number of different quotes. There's nothing I think more wonderful than a group of first graders gathered in the hallway proclaiming, give me liberty or give me death. Right, so they'll learn some of those great quotes. Our seventh graders will memorize the first, second, and final paragraphs to the Declaration of Independence. And they're doing all of that memorization and recitation, first of all, because they're building a store of knowledge and of beautiful language and that sort of thing, but also because it will support them when, for example, in 11th grade, they study moral and political philosophy. And there they'll read works by Plato and Aristotle, Rousseau and John Locke and Thomas Jefferson, and all of these people that were an influence on our government, and that hopefully will be an influence on our students and their perceptions of what is good and the kind of life that a person should live. And then, of course, in American government in 12th grade, they'll read the works of people like Jefferson, Madison, and others who are our founders and wrote those founding documents, and so get a deeper look into the ideas that underlie them. So you can see how that progression builds in all the different subject areas through the grades. Slide, please. I know that's very hard to see, and I apologize for that. You can find these. These are curriculum maps for each grade level that you can find online. On Googling Hillsdale K-12's website. They'll have all of these for kindergarten through 12th grade. This is just a little bit of a closer look at the sort of thing that kindergartners would be reading. I have the kindergarten and the 5th grade ones in here specifically. So in literature, for example, a lot of the kindergarten curriculum is Mother Goose tales or Aesop's fables, some Winnie the Pooh stories, American tall tales. So they'll read things like Chicken Little, Little Red Hen, the story of King Midas, the Three Little Pigs, that sort of thing. So being exposed to these classic stories that have been passed down from generation to generation. In science, they're getting their first exposure to things like the human systems, right? How to take care of your body, what the 5 senses are and how they work, plants and animals, how they grow, and so really being exposed to sort of the basics. But the centerpiece, the most important part of the kindergarten curriculum, and what they spend the majority of their day doing, is phonics, because that's the most important thing that they should be learning at that grade level, is that ability to read, to put together words. Slide, please. And this is a look at 5th grade, and I went up to 5th grade because we're starting with K through 5, but you can see, I think, how the things that they're reading get progressively more complex, and this is certainly, I think, more advanced than what most 5th graders are probably doing, right? So in 5th grade, literature and history, for example, they'll be reading The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, Alice in Wonderland, which is a much more complex story than most people give it credit for. It's very simply written, but it is deep discussions that come out of that. Stories about Sherlock Holmes, The Wind in the Willows, which is wonderful. So again, you can see sort of the progression through the grade. And if you want to look at the full curriculum maps, we'll be putting them up on our website very soon, but they're also on the Hillsdale K-12 Initiatives website. Slides, please. This is a sample schedule for a kindergartner. So this is not finalized or set in stone, but this is the sort of thing that you can expect a kindergartner to be doing in an average day at Ivy Classical Academy. So typically, students will start to come in the door at about 7:30, and we will gather in the cafeteria. And then at about 7:59, we'll do those morning recitations. So we'll recite the Pledge of Allegiance in English, we'll recite the Pledge of Allegiance in Latin, we'll go on to our honor code, our school pledge, and our school's mission, and then their teachers will come pick them up and bring them back to class. Homeroom is them getting seated, getting their things out of their backpack, getting any homework that they might have had turned in, and then they'll turn to math. And typically, that first math block will be about 50 minutes to an hour long. And the idea in that math block is students are fresh, it's the beginning of the day, so this is a perfect time to teach them something new, right? Some sort of new concept. And then they'll go on to grammar or composition or literacy, really in kindergarten. And from about 9, I believe I'm actually looking at the schedule for 5th grade here, aren't I? Yeah, that's all right. Can you go to the next one? Yeah, so this is the more accurate one. There we go. No, it's not. That's also 5th grade. These are both 5th grade schedules. Go back to the kindergarten one. It's okay. I'll make it up as I go along. All right. So then after the math block, they will start with the math block in kindergarten. After the math block, though, they'll go on to literacy, right? And in their literacy block, the focus will be on introducing some new concept in their phonics program, right? And over the course of the day, they will have somewhere between 120 and 160 minutes of literacy, broken up typically into 15 to 20-minute increments. Part of that will be practicing writing together, part of that will be practicing reading together, part of that will be being read to by the teacher and talking about what it is that they're reading. All of those things will happen during those literacy blocks. The idea, though, is to introduce all of the different sounds that the letters of the English language to make those connections with the printed word on the page, and to expose them to high-level vocabulary. And this is one of the reasons why reading to children is so important, is that when we read, we use much better grammar. If you listen, and I always try to avoid it when I'm up on a stage in front of people, but if you ever just listen to somebody talk, we tend to talk in kind of bursts of 3 to 6 words. And it's very ungrammatical. You ever read court documents and it has the transcript of what people are saying, and we all sound like completely inarticulate, like what is this person doing? But that's the way we actually talk. We tend to talk in these bursts of words that make sense, I guess, when you hear them out loud, but are not grammatically correct in the formal sense, right? So reading to children exposes them to proper grammar, the grammar that they'll need when they're writing things, for example, and it exposes them to much higher level vocabulary. We tend to use much bigger words and much denser text when we're writing than what we do when we are speaking, right? So we spend a lot of time doing that. In the afternoon, so skipping here because I'm looking at the 5th grade schedule. In the afternoon, our kindergartners will have 2 more math blocks. So the first math block is 50 to 60 minutes, and then the others are 20 to 30 minutes each. So the midday math block is to practice whatever new concept they learn in the morning, and then the end of day math block is another time for them to get typically small group instruction at that point. So a teacher can work with a small group of students that may be struggling with whatever new concept they learn that day, right? While an instructional assistant works with the rest of the class, for example, right? Or students maybe who are a bit ahead, because we don't ability group in the lower school, students who are a little bit ahead can now get a little bit more personalized attention at that point as well, okay? Kindergartners will also do 20 minutes of history every day, 20 minutes of science every day. Typically what that is being read to aloud by the teacher. So again, more examples or more possibilities to be exposed to great high-level vocabulary with great content. We'll also do 30 minutes of recess, and this is the same as the 5th grade schedule here. 30 minutes of recess every day, 30 minutes of PE every day, so that's about an hour of outside time every day, or at least time to run around every day, and then of course 30 minutes of lunch as well. The art, the music, and the language will rotate with each other in all grade levels. Typically, they'll get each of those once a week, and then there'll be some remediation the other 2 days of the week. But opportunities both to be exposed to great works of art, to be exposed to great works of music, and, of course, to sing and to make music, and hopefully to create great works of art of their own as well. Slide, please. So this is the 5th grade schedule that we've already been looking at here, but you get the idea. The time is extended for history, for example, to about 30 minutes, to science to about 30 to 40 minutes, and then it's decreased a bit for the literacy because they're no longer focusing on phonics, and we always teach composition or grammar or literacy as a separate block from literature, so that they have the opportunity to study how to read and write, but also to read great works as well. All right. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. This is a look at our school's virtues. So we'll recite these virtues every day at the start of the day. And students over the course of the year will also memorize each of these affirmations that accompany each of our school's virtues. So every month we'll choose a virtue to focus on school-wide, and we'll repeat the affirmation together and talk about that virtue and read stories about it and poems about it, and hopefully emphasize that these are the things that no matter where you are, no matter who you are good things and will help you to become the kind of person that we've already talked about, a compassionate and virtuous person. Next slide, please. All right, so here are some of the extracurricular activities that we'll have at Ivy Classical Academy. We'll have lots of after-school and before-school events, things like Donuts with Dad, of course, a father-daughter dance, a mother and son dance probably at some point, a movie night for our families, muffins with mom, and these are just some examples of the sort of thing that we'll do. So you can plan probably to have a before and after-school event of that kind once every month or so. We're planning on having as many competitive sports as our students are able to handle. Academics, of course, are the focus, but once we get to middle school, we want our students to have an opportunity to participate in all sorts of things. Archery is at the top of my wish list. Basketball is a definite. Of course, baseball, softball, cheerleading, crew, cross country, right? All of those things. And of course, we'll have clubs for children with special interests. We plan to start these as young as we can. So ballet, for example, all the way down to the elementary school. Chess club, probably sometime mid-elementary. And then, of course, a drama club. Once you get to middle school, everybody loves middle school drama. So we'll definitely have to have it. Slide, please. And here's a look at our school. And I apologize that it's just a floor plan, but we'll have more than that very soon. So this is the first floor of our lower school. This is where our kindergarten and our first grade will be. So if you're looking at the dark blue classrooms along the side there, those are kindergarten classrooms. And you can see that the kindergarten classrooms share a bathroom with one other classroom. So they have restrooms that are actually internal to the classrooms themselves. That makes it so that kindergartners won't have to go out in the hallway to use the restroom. And then our first grade classrooms are shaded sort of light blue there. That big, I guess it's kind of brownish block that you see there is where our cafeteria will be. And then the yellow that's just across from it is the administrative offices. You can see the orange there is the entrance to the building, so that's where students will come in when you drop them off and where they'll come out when you pick them up. And of course where you would come to pick up your children or come to eat lunch with them and that sort of thing. Next slide, please. So this is the second floor of that lower school building. This is our second through fifth grade will be on this floor. Second grade is the kind of beige color at the top there. Third grade is the light blue, and then you've got 4th grade in the purple and 5th grade in orange there. So that'll be our entire lower school with K through 5 in it in our first year. All of our students will be in that building. But we're also, if you go to the next slide, prepared to have our first upper school students in our second year, because the middle school will be prepared for them. And this will be the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So if you're looking at kind of the total floor plan, that lower school floor with the kindergarten and 1st grade classrooms, this is just on the other side of that orange entrance area from that. And so this will be where our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders will be here. Slide, please. All right. Our enrollment for 2024-25, which is our first school year, opens on December 4th. On December 4th, we will start to accept students' names, right? So you'll have to get on Schoolment, which will be the program that we're using, but you'll be able to access it through our website at ivyclassical.org. And you'll have until February 5th to put your child's name into that lottery. On February 5th, our lottery will be conducted. And the way that works is this. Any faculty or staff member or board member who has children in the lottery, their children will basically rise to the top in that lottery and be the first selected. Behind them will be any students from Elmore County. So if we have 642, we do have 642 seats in K through 5, right? If we have 700 applicants from Elmore County, then 642 of them will be randomly selected as our first group of students. The rest of them will go on to a wait list. Excuse me. If we don't have all of those students from Elmore County, then students from other nearby counties, like Autauga County, will have their opportunity in that lottery. And so they'll be basically the next ones behind the students from Elmore County. Does that make sense? Right? February 14th through 28th is our window for final registration. So you will get an email after that February 5th lottery saying you have until the 28th to complete registration. At that point, you'll need to submit documentation showing that you live in Elmore County, if you were on that list, or proof of address for whatever county you live in. You'll need to submit some other paperwork, basically the same paperwork that would be required of you at the public schools, right? You'll have until the 28th to do that. If you don't complete that registration process by the 28th, then your child may lose their seat, because the next child behind them on that wait list will take their place in the lottery system. Next slide, please. All right. In addition to 642 students in kindergarten through 5th grade, we also need teachers for all of those students. K through 5 classroom teachers, art and music teachers, special education teachers, a Latin teacher. All of those things are things that we are looking for. In addition, we're looking for staff. We're looking for a director for our special education department. We're looking for a custodian and a facilities manager. We're looking for front office staff, a school nurse. If you know anyone, or if you are a person who would like to work at a school like the one that I have described and share a common philosophy of education and want to take part in that mission, then I encourage you to email your resume, or to encourage that other person to email their resume to me. And I'll show my email address here at the end, right there. If you have any questions, I think we have a little bit of time to take tuition free. Yes, it is. I want to emphasize that. I think it's on the sign out there. So charter schools, let me explain charter schools very quickly, right? Not all charter schools have the same curriculum or mission that we have. In fact, most of them do not have anything in common with us other than the fact that they are also charter schools. What makes a charter school is that it is a public school that is given some freedom to determine its own curriculum, its own school culture, and to govern itself independently of the local public school district, right? So we get to determine how we teach, what we teach, that sort of thing. Now, the thing that we sort of have to give back to the district is that we then have to do better than the district schools when we take those standardized tests at the end of the year. Now, but I hope you were listening to the first 45 minutes of my, I'm going to call it a sermon, right, because it was, my soapboxing, right, about the purpose of an education. We have to do better on those tests, and we will do better on those tests. But we will not focus on those tests. They will not become the center point of our curriculum. We will not spend all of our time drilling and training and preparing for the test with a capital T and a TM at the end, right? We'll do them, we'll get them out of the way, and we'll outperform the district, no doubt about it, right? But that's our curriculum and our philosophy of education. And that's, we get the right to have that and to maintain that because we do better on those tests, right? And we are tuition free as a public school. It is at High Point, which is, you could probably describe the location better than I can. It is near, yeah, yeah, there you go. What's that? Prattville. Yeah, it's at Prattville. So if you go, I know that, yeah, it is. Yeah, we are in Elmore County, but again, students from surrounding counties can attend Ivy Classical Academy. It's just that students from Elmore County get the preference in the lottery, right? All right. What other questions do you have? Yes, ma'am, in the pink. Yeah, that's a good question. So it differs by grade level, and we have a kind of standard homework program, but the bottom line is, especially in the lower school, so when you're talking about kindergarten through 5th grade, which is what we're starting with, the biggest focus area is reading, because that's the most important thing that children can do, right? I think, you know, there are lots of different philosophies of homework, but what the research says is that sending home 45 minutes of, you know, a bunch of things with a kindergartner is just not effective. It's not doing anything but wasting their time and probably inducing a few tears from their mom and maybe even from the kindergartner. So kindergartners, 1st graders, 2nd graders, typically you can expect about 15 to 20 minutes of phonics work of some kind, and that's just them trying to read the letters aloud to you, that sort of thing. But the most important thing is 20 minutes of reading to your child every night, and that's something that we assign as homework. Once they get up into high school, it'll be a bit more of a load, and at that point, hopefully, they're completing it more independently. So they'll be getting, you know, some Latin vocabulary practice. Typically some reading for each of the major subject areas, history, science, literature, and definitely some math problems as well, right? So it'll increase as time goes on, but in the lower school, the focus is on that reading homework. There was somebody else. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. That was the preference that I skipped. So the next set of preferences there is sibling preference. So if one child gets in through the lottery, then their siblings also rise to the top there. There's somebody else's hand was up over here. I didn't want to skip them. Yes, ma'am. Student to teacher ratio. I want to say in K through 3 it is 18 is what we're planning for. That sounds right to me. K through 3 is 18, and then in 4 and 5, 22. So. Yes, ma'am. Say it again. September 5th. The birthday cutoff for kindergarten? Yes. They have to turn 5 by September 5th of the year that they enter kindergarten. Yes, ma'am. And I will say I have a strong preference based on years of experience for, I like that law. I know that not everybody likes it, but students entering kindergarten too early is not a good thing. Yes. Yeah, so We're looking at somewhere between 3 and 6 per grade level, so probably 6 for kindergarten through about second, and then fewer as we go up the grades. Yeah. Sir?
Recess. Last school they were at, they just walked them in circles. What do you guys do to...
Recess? Free play. Yeah, I mean, that should be time to run around and get all that energy out. One thing that I do not support is taking away recess as a way of punishing a child. You know, it's completely, it doesn't accomplish the end that you would like to think that it does, right? Because what you're actually doing is taking somebody who's probably feeling rambunctious anyway and making them bottle that energy up even more. Right, so, yeah. Yeah, please.
I didn't really see the real kindergarten schedule. Do the younger grades get more outside playtime than 5th grade was?
No, it's more or less the same. It's more or less consistent across K through 5, about 30 minutes of recess a day. They will have an afternoon break time in kindergarten. They eat something of an early lunch. So they'll have an afternoon break time, and then about 30 minutes of PE every day. PE, oh, I'm sorry, physical education. Yeah, what is PE? So, yeah, so it takes lots of different forms, but some of it is more structured, some of it's less structured. In the early grades, a lot of it is just getting the wiggles out and getting them, moving, and so it might be, learning, different sports skills or getting them running. Getting them doing push-ups and basic fitness and that sort of thing. As they go up the grades, it'll be a little bit more structured. They'll learn different dances. They learn the waltz, I think, in 4th grade. So it would depend on the day. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. How will? I still didn't hear what you said. Hiring. I'm hiring. Yeah, that's one of those freedoms that they give us as a charter school is that I get to determine who works at Ivy Classical Academy. So I'm hiring. I'll tell you, let me say this before I'll just give you the full answer there. They need to be able to teach a subject well. That's what I'm looking for, right? One of the things that I am very happy that I don't have to deal with in Alabama is teacher certification, because Alabama does not require teachers at charter schools to be certified. That is a very, very, very good thing, because teacher certification is not an effective use of time and money, right? I'm looking for teachers who are smart and know their subject, who are willing to adapt to fit our curricular needs, and who are great role models for our students. I am not looking for teachers who have a teacher certification. I'll tell you why, right? I can give you an example of why. Well, the most important thing that a kindergarten teacher can teach is phonics. By far, the most important thing. In my time as a leader in education, I have interviewed hundreds of people to be kindergarten teachers. And most of them have gone through certification programs, because if you want to be a kindergarten teacher, chances are you knew you wanted to be a kindergarten teacher when you were in kindergarten, right? That's just the kind of people that it is. So they went to school to be kindergarten teachers and spent 4 years studying phonics, right? Because that's the most important thing that they can teach? No. None of them ever came into the classroom knowing how to teach phonics. I and Hillsdale, the support team that you saw in that video, had to teach them how every single time. Now take that up to something like 12th grade or 11th grade American government. I'm looking for somebody with a PhD in political philosophy. I don't care if he's got a teacher certification. I'm not looking for somebody with a social studies, certification, because they're generally not prepared to teach at that high of a level. So I'm looking for people that can teach the subject. The most important one in the room, yes, ma'am.
what she said. I am so glad that you are learning about question marks. I know, I put a few, there were a couple of random question marks. We didn't use our question mark right in this presentation. I'm sorry about that, okay? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we have an outside area, and we're going to have yeah, so we've got an outside area designated for our recess area, and we're actually expanding that as time goes on. We're going to have a really nice, so right, if you're looking at, like, if you know the area, the High Point area, if you were standing at that belk looking straight down, all of that is going to be green space. That's not going to be for cars anymore. And so there's going to be a lot of area for young feet to get out the energy. They have been empty for a long time now. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so if you're standing at the Belk, there are 4 buildings. All of those are ours. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Sir, thanks for the presentation.
Sure.
We have a number of military-affiliated children in the area.
Outstanding.
I'm sure you can appreciate
Yeah.
that. We've gone to a variety of schools, public schools, DoDEA schools, et cetera. How do you integrate students who are coming from, various backgrounds into a classical education later on in life?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad that you asked that. And it's really important. One of the things I do wish that we were able to do in Alabama was give a preference to veterans' children. We were able to do that in previous schools that I've been at, and it's definitely a good thing. So we do, talking about our first year, right, we'll be taking in students in 5th grade who don't have any background in classical education. So what we do is very intentionally modify the curriculum to sort of swoop back around and fill in a lot of those gaps, right? So first of all, we need to get to know the children as individuals. We'll take some tests, right, that will give us a general assessment of reading and math levels. I will tell you that I've never seen a test, even good tests like the one that we use, which is NWEA. I've never seen a test that didn't tell me anything I didn't know from teaching that child for 30 minutes, right? But we'll take the test, we'll get a holistic picture, and we'll spend some time every afternoon with enrichment and remediation should individual children need either of those things. But as a general rule, we modify the curriculum in the first 3 years. So 5th graders, for example, go through our phonics program for the first 3 years, whereas typically we would be done with phonics by that point and we'd be moving on to grammar. We go back and we fill in that phonics gap because we know a lot of our students are not coming with at least as much exposure to phonics as we'd like them to have, right? The same thing is true of the content areas as well. So we'll spend time, for example, sort of filling in the gaps in history, because typically in 5th grade you'd pick up with the Renaissance, but the Renaissance means nothing if you've never heard of the Middle Ages, right? So we'll go back and fill in some of those gaps and get them caught up. And typically about 3 years is what it takes to do that. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, ma'am. In kindergarten, yeah. Yeah, in kindergarten through 5th grade, they'll have one teacher who teaches all the core subjects. So their homeroom teacher will teach science, literacy, and that includes literature, all the English, right? Math, history, and what did I miss? Science, English, math, history, English, right? All those, the 4 cores, right? Question mark. Sorry. The more specialized subjects, Latin, for example, will have a Latin teacher who teaches Latin. He'll come into the classroom, or she'll come into the classroom and teach. And Latin, I know, I know it sounds tough, right? But for kindergartners, Latin is reading Roman myths together, right? So don't expect your child to come home and, Sum es Romanos, mama, right? And it's not going to happen, right? So, but by the time that they're in 6th grade, they're kind of doing Latin kind of more in earnest, and so they're actually at that point learning the language. But K through 5, elementary, they'll learn some words and phrases, the colors, and how to count to 10, but a lot of it is teaching the mythology and that sort of thing, right? And then they do art separate, so we'll have a separate art teacher, a separate PE teacher, a separate music teacher. What am I missing? That's it, yeah. The core subjects, though, they'll be in the classroom with one teacher. No, we don't have, unfortunately, we don't have enough to have an instructional aide for every classroom. We tend to focus the instructional aides on the lower school. So the goal is to have one per about 2 classes in kindergarten, and then maybe 1 per grade level above that. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So I think Aristotle and Plato sort of answered those questions, right? They were outside of that context of Christianity or of the Bible, but were able to reach the conclusion that there are things that are objectively good and true. And when students want to go beyond that, now in high school those questions might come up, right? If we're depending on what we're studying, right? But especially in the lower school, ultimately it's directed to the parents to answer that sort of question, right? But I think that what we can kind of universally agree on is that those objective things do exist, right? And for Aristotle, he found it in the happy human life, basically, right? That this is what leads to human flourishing, eudaimonia in the Greek, and didn't necessarily have to appeal to, anything outside of that. Right. Yes, ma'am. Sure. Yes. Once you're in, you're in. Yeah, so we'll send home re-enrollment every year in January, but the re-enrollment is just to see if you're coming back or if people move and that sort of thing. Just get a sense of things. But you're in, you're in. Yep. And any children who are like if a 1-year-old and you have a child that gets in, that 1-year-old is in 4 years, right? Yes. I don't know the answer to that question.
I can answer that question. I don't know if everybody can hear me, but
yeah.
Elmore County is the local education authorizer. So if we ever did move facilities, it would have to be within Elmore County. And I can tell you with 100% assurance that we are not going to go through the charter application process for a third time.
No, she's talking about students. Yeah, I'll get an answer. I'm sure that's not the first time it's ever come up, but yeah, I don't. Yeah.
And the charter commission.
Yeah, I can get you an answer. Can you email that to me? Because I'll get you an answer. Yes.
Okay, so my question is, if we get in and we do the first year and for various reasons it doesn't work out for our family, or is it an accreditation where we can return back to the public or private?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That'll be seamless. So we'll pursue separate accreditation, but they'll recognize all of as a public school. Any of our coursework and that sort of thing will be recognized by any other public school.
For the teachers that are wanting to apply or that we want to talk to, what is this? I know it's public education in Alabama. Would they still be state employees or are they a part of your Hillsborough?
Yeah, so it's very much sort of that gray area thing that charter schools applies to the teachers as well. So they are employees of Ivy Classical Academy, but they get to be a part of the teacher's retirement system and healthcare plan. So they won't lose their pension or anything like that. We will go on to 9 through 12 as well.
Is it just one grade per year, though?
1 grade per year. Yep.
And in looking at, we're talking about military families and others, we have a lot of non-English speaking
Yeah.
children that come here. Will there be ESL services?
Yes.
To the SPED services, and do the SPED services go all the way up to fully contained classrooms, or is there a limit?
Yeah, that's a good, really good question. So, financially and our financials and our model does not allow us to have self-contained classrooms, but we'll look at IEPs and 504s as they come in and adjust as necessary to meet the needs of our students. Right. When it comes to ESL, we will have ESL. We'll have to look at the number of students we have to determine whether we need a full-time person to do it or whether it's something we can contract out, that sort of thing. But we will have those services. Yes.
Background check on faculty.
Yeah.
How rigorous is that?
Yeah, it'll be the same one that any teacher has to go through in Alabama. So that's one. As a public school, all of our faculty, staff, everybody else who works at the school, even parent volunteers, have to go through the state background check.
I think he referred not like criminal-wise,
Yeah.
but like as in 'cause he went to school in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
so he doesn't have a diploma or.
Oh, that I don't know. I'd have to talk. Yeah, we'd have to talk about that offline. I don't know the individual circumstances. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Would you allow 4-H programs in the school?
4-H? I think so, yeah. So rule of thumb when it comes to clubs is as long as it's something that any student can join, as long as something that any child at Ivy can join, then it's a possibility for us, right? So what we don't want are clubs that are only for select groups based on identity or ideology, that sort of thing, right? Yeah. Yeah, I know 4-H. So 4-H is good with me. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it starts with the teaching of the virtues, right? I think one of the things that I always find kind of continually perplexing in education is how bad the behavior has gotten in so many public schools and how, I don't know, confused so many people in the public schools are about how it got that way, when they've been telling, that same generation of kids that grew up without phonics are also being told that there's no such thing as the good, the true, and the beautiful. There's what you think is good and true and beautiful, right? There's not truth, there's my truth and your truth, but no the truth. And when you tell them that, they tend to behave like that, right? Because the truth is that I don't find math all that good. And, isn't it beautiful when the teacher gets mad, right? So I think it starts with what we were already talking about. Now, when there are times when, anywhere that you are, there are going to be children who act up, and children do things that they shouldn't do, right? So we'll have behavior trackers in the lower school. It'll be sent home every day, basically, here's how your child's day was, that sort of thing. And that'll be all the way kindergarten through 5th grade. For more serious things, we'll have demerits. We call it a level 2 demerit in the lower school and in the upper school. And this will be, basically like getting written up, right? And there'll be kind of a series of escalating consequences should those things happen. In the upper school, we'll have a merit and demerit system once we have students that are in 6th grade and above that will affect their standing in terms of being able to participate in extracurricular activities. And it'll also feed into our house points we'll have houses. I would say like Oxford, but the one that everyone recognizes is like Harry Potter. So we'll have houses that the children are divided up into in the upper school, and so the merits and demerits will feed into that as well, and that'll be for kind of low-level things, right? And with those systems, with a really firm set of consistent procedures, and then with the follow-through that comes from the lower school behavior tracker and the upper school merit and demerit system, that tends to create a very orderly environment that all of our students can thrive in. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
How is parent involvement? Are parents like, I don't know, I feel like the school my kid goes to right now, parents are like, not allowed. It's like firm, we don't want parents in the classroom, we don't want parents coming to anything. Like, if you walk through that door, you have like, I
Yeah.
don't know, like a police
So we will have parent volunteer opportunities. I'm hoping that a lot of our faculty members and staff members are parents of students as well. We definitely want parent volunteers for car line and for lunch duty. Those are two that are two of those areas that we always need extra hands. But we also want parent volunteers in the classroom, right? So a lot of that can be coordinated by your child's teacher, because it'll be things like coming in to read to the students, or maybe make photocopies for the teachers and help them distribute things, maybe help them grade papers and that sort of thing. But we're always looking for parent volunteers. Parents who don't have the ability to volunteer but maybe can stop by once in a while, you are very welcome to come and have lunch with your child. And if you'd like to observe a class, then you have to set it up with the teacher ahead of time, but you are welcome to do that as well.
So, like,
Yeah.
I guess building on that, I guess there's two parts.
Sure.
The first is I feel like the school my daughter goes to right now, they like look at all the fun things in education and they like suck it out. It's like, well, you can't do that because that's too fun.
Mhm.
So, like, do kids still? I don't like. There's a child. Like, you only get one child.
Yeah.
So, like, I understand that like your philosophy is wonderful, but is it still like a place that's fun for kids?
I think it's fun.
Is it still a place like where you can like have a Halloween party or a Valentine's party? Are you still going to do those kind of things, or is it going to be like we can't do that because it might offend someone?
No, so we have our own events. I'll say this: I want you to spend some more time looking at what Hillsdale affiliated schools do, right? And look at the kind of the philosophy behind classical education, right? Because what I don't want, what I don't think anyone wants, is to come to a new school, whether it's Ivy Classical or any school, because you don't like your old school, so much as because you like what this new school is doing. Does that make sense, right? So get to know the ideas behind it, get to know what other Hillsdale schools are doing and that sort of thing, and that'll help to understand the philosophy and then to make a better judgment over whether it's for you and for your child, right? Now, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into the mud on things, right? But there are opportunities for parties and that sort of thing. Halloween party, we do something a little bit different. We call it Living Timeline Day, and they dress up as historical figures, right, instead of goblins and witches and that kind of thing. But it's just as fun, I think. So there are opportunities for that sort of thing. But I don't want to spend too much time on all the specifics because I know there's lots of different ones. But I would say look at the general philosophy. Yes, learning absolutely can and should be fun. Sometimes it's not, right? But it's it should be a part of the life of a school. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so we'll have events at the beginning of the school year and then over the course of the school year, and we'll send out a newsletter from the school itself once a week once the school year starts, right? So every Friday typically we'll send out a newsletter. It'll have events and what's going on at the school, but there'll also be opportunities for learning more about classical education that we'll put into that newsletter. Might be podcasts or articles or a short message from me or one of the deans, whatever it is. We'll also have curriculum nights, typically about once a month. So we'll have a night where parents can come to the school and learn more about Singapore math and why we teach math the way we do, and get exposed to a little bit of the curriculum. We'll have a night dedicated to literacy essentials phonics, right? We might spend some time talking about why we use Socratic discussion and what that looks like at different grade levels. So all of that with the goal, hopefully, of introducing what a classical education is to parents. And again, one of the things that I encourage parents to do is to come and actually see the school, right? It takes a few years, really, but time for students, especially in the upper grades, to sort of get into the rhythm of what a classical education looks like. But once they reach that point, I think seeing it for yourself really is, eye-opening in a lot of ways. Yeah. Ma'am. Yeah, we will. So happily, Elmore County Public Schools are big supporters of us, and they are very happy to have us. Richard Dennis, the superintendent, has been more than welcoming to us. And so one of the things that they'll be able to provide for us is lunches for our students. All right. Well, if you have any more questions, please email me. My email is up on the screen there, and I'll stick around here if you want to approach me one-on-one. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have as well. Thank you all for coming tonight. Have a great rest of your evening.